Welcome back to another episode of Have Game Will Travel. I'm your host, Bennett Newsome. I'm the Director of Esports Growth and Development here at Full Sail University, but you may know me as DamnitBennett out there on the internet. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're super excited that you're here. And maybe this is your first time watching Have Game Will Travel. This is an interview style focused show that talks all about the esports industry and how there is so much more to that than just being good at the game. So we kind of take a virtual trip through our guest's journey through the industry. So if this is your first time here, welcome, and we're excited to have you. And if you're coming back for more, welcome back. But let's get started. I want to welcome our guest here today, and Becca, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and yeah, let's go from there.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so I'm Becca Godsey. I am an associate course director currently at Full Sail University. I've been teaching the creative presentation class, which gives me just the wonderful gambit of every student in every industry, which has been very exciting. But on top of it, I've been a marketing producer. I've been a marketing analyst. I've done social media. I also stream. I'm a show host. I produce my own show on Twitch as well. So, a few other things, some voice acting here or there, you name it. I like to dabble a little bit in all.
Absolutely. Lots of hats. We all wear a ton of different hats in this industry, which is always really cool. But I'm excited to have you here. So one of the things that we kind of start out every show off with is just getting an understanding for your background in gaming and entertainment. And so what got you interested in gaming, to start with?
Yeah, at the very beginning, it was always just like a family thing, playing with my siblings, but I didn't really get into it until my brothers got a little bit older, and it was the easiest way for me to connect with them. So I started playing Halo.
Okay.
Arguably, I was not very good at it, but it turns out you don't have to be good at video games to enjoy them. So
Yep.
we had a lot of fun doing that. And then I started getting much more engaged at the collegiate level. And I was doing a lot more of the event planning. It turns out I knew a lot of gamers. So I started helping to host events and whatnot. So it was very exciting and kind of getting the ball rolling at that point.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think there's been so many people that we've had on the show that talked about that early childhood experience and that family gaming type of vibe, right? And so many of us shared that that kind of passion for gaming, and then really kind of grew as gaming grew through the console generation into whatever came next, which was always fun. For me, I love this question. It's probably one of my favorite ones that we ask is what was the first game you ever loved? I fell absolutely in love with Doom when 32X came out. It was that thing you put on top of your Sega console, and it made it better, apparently.
Yeah.
But do you have that? Do you think about back to a game that you're like, this is the first game that I actually like? Oh, this is it. I love this game.
Yes, absolutely. Maze Craze on Atari is one of my favorites. It's anxiety inducing,
Yes.
but I love it so much. The sound and just the simplicity of the controller. Like, you just have the joystick.
Yeah.
And the panic of trying to get through it as quickly as possible is one of my favorites. I love it. And I haven't had a chance to play it in so long.
It's always funny when you look back at those games too. And you go on YouTube and like, whoa, look at, and it's such a different, it's kind of like a culture shock almost, because you have such a vivid memory of how great the game was. And then you look at it, you're like, okay, this is like, it's a square moving on the screen,
Yes.
You're so confused. Like, this looks so much cooler when I was a kid.
In my head, I pictured this differently. Like, I remember playing like Legends of Dragoon on the PlayStation, and I was like, oh yeah, this was visually great. Like, I remember, and I look back at the game, I'm like, I don't see what I saw at all. How did I have such an amazing imagination? I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess that's how it goes. But I feel like today's games, they come out this way, right? Like, they look so good, and it's hard to sometimes like see that improvement over the years because we had such a drastic jump from console to console, right? That we grew up with, and now it's it's getting better and better and better, and sometimes you don't get as much love into the holy cow, look at this game, this is incredible, So gaming, obviously family kind of oriented for you. Did you kind of see this as like your first passion when you were younger, or did gaming kind of come out of a different potential?
Gaming definitely had to come out of a different venture, especially growing up. There wasn't a lot of games exactly targeted to women.
Yep. Fair
You
enough.
know, like I remember seeing like the Taco Bell commercials and they were not for me.
Yeah.
I was never in that kind of commercial. So like the idea of like career wise or going into that, like that didn't make any
Yeah.
sense whatsoever, much less feeling like a place of that with other people outside of like my home life.
Right.
So that it didn't feel like it ever translated beyond just a personal experience until college. And
Yeah.
even then, I didn't see it as a career, but it was like, oh, I can now connect and make friends with
Right.
other people. Like that was my first experience of actual gaming as a community. So it took a while.
Yeah, definitely. But I like that kind of community focus that you have because I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of things that you do now are so focused in kind of your community, right? Like
Yes.
that's an important kind of milestone and like piece of the puzzle for you in building this. And so let's talk about college. You got a bachelor's degree in communication from Southwest Baptist University.
Good.
Talk to us about your time at the university.
I went there because I wanted to be on the speech and debate team, and they
Okay.
were very good.
I like that. I didn't know this. That's great.
So I did that. I actually at the time I hated debate. I actually really hated public speaking still. At that point when I first went in, I enjoyed the acting part. I could not imagine myself as a speaker. It still made me physically sick to have to present my own content.
Yep.
But if I were using somebody else's, it was easier because they were critiquing a person.
Right.
So it was really in college I wanted to delve into this more, and it was the place that offered me a scholarship to do so too.
Hey, you can't go
I
wrong
thought,
there, right?
all right, here we go. I get some money for the things that I want to do. And ultimately that's what we pursue in life, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It became a good theme, but it pushed me in a lot of ways of learning what I really enjoyed, and that's allowed me to be flexible in my career because, you know, what do you do with a degree in communication, right? There's some degrees like, "Oh, I'm going into accounting, you're going to become an
Right.
accountant." Right? Like there's a clear pathway of
For
the
sure.
career choice that you're going into, but with communication, it's so much broader, which is terrifying. But it was a big exposure for me to get to experience the stories of others and for me to learn more about myself and how I wanted to tell my story for the first time. Because as you're telling other stories, it makes you think about what you're doing and how you're building yourself. And that was a very big, strong point in
Yeah.
my life. And I wanted to start creating spaces that allowed others to embrace themselves more fully and figure out how they wanted to tell their stories as well, which is why I've now had a myriad of careers because
Yeah.
I've been able to do that in a variety of ways.
And I think like that base skill set allows you to kind of go in multiple directions because
Mhm,
it's a big part of what we all do, right?
mhm.
Gaming, any other sort of communication aspect, like we're communicating with other people, and that's a huge thing. So you took that bachelor's and then elevated that again, right, and got your master's in
Yes.
communication at Missouri State University. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. I
Awesome.
thought, let's just keep this ball going.
Yeah. I like that. And throughout this
Yes.
time in college, I mean, it sounds like gaming was part of that
Mhm,
journey, that experience, that college experience that you had. Tell us a
mhm.
little bit about kind of that discovery of gaming and how that kind of started to go into a different direction.
Sure. So, I mean, I of course did it into different events. Like I hosted the very first video game tournament at my university. We did a Halo 2 tournament. The university didn't provide us anything. I just called all of my contacts together and we had the controllers, the consoles,
Yeah.
everything. And like the prizes were silly things like water guns. So if you got like a killing frenzy, you got a water gun, you know, like
Yeah.
depending on how well you did, you got different sizes of water guns because that's all the money we had. And we got Taco Bell to bring in all like free tacos, and you know, so we did the whole full thing, and it was very exciting. But when I went into grad school, it turns out during grad school you don't have a lot of time for anything else.
Right.
So gaming went back to being a place of just a personal reprieve for a while, and I have to thank my partner for this. Yeah, Mudcats in chat. That was a
Yeah.
good tournament. We lost. We were the team unicorns. I made shirts. I still wear the shirt. I still fit in it. I'm very proud of that fact. Um, but he never lost that vision for gaming, and seeing that inspired me to say, I love the communities building. I want to build a community of my own that allows me to build that vision that I wanted of having a space. And it took a long time for me to keep pushing that community to where we are currently, because it turns out when you open that door and you let a lot of people in, you start getting a lot of opinions and ideas and you second guess yourself a lot. And so it's taken a while to where we are now, which I'm incredibly proud of, to be a space where we get to explore ourselves very holistically, seriously, in silly ways, in very fascinating ways as we explore the stories of ourselves and others. So,
absolutely.
and yes to free tacos.
Yeah, I know. I mean, first off, this is the second Taco Bell reference. So
yeah, let's
chat
keep it
is
counting.
very excited now. You have their attention.
Yes.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think that's such an important piece of any content creator's journey is really finding that kind of true piece of them and sharing that with people in a way that feels right for them, right? Like they fit, hey, I fit here, I belong here. And that, I think, is such a common part of, you know, Twitch and gaming and just that kind of culture altogether. So many people just, they want to belong to something, right? And when you find other people, or you find other content creators or pro, you know, esports athletes, like whatever it may be, like, and you feel part of that, that's such a great feeling. And so having those types of goals to build that is really something that I always encourage. And I'm glad that you guys are, you know, carving out your space as well, which is super important. So let's talk kind of jobs while in college. You have a lot of TA that I see here. Obviously you kind of took on a lot of teaching assistant positions. Was your goal to get into teaching initially? Like obviously going from communications and then doing the TA positions, was that just something you kind of fell into, or how did you end up there?
Yeah. So small little, I guess, trivia piece is I was actually a sandwich artist first.
Ooh.
That's some way.
All right, we're getting many plugs on the show today.
Yeah. But yes, I didn't go in with the plan of teaching. I have found that whenever I make plans, they don't pan out.
Yep.
Like I have a vision, and then it's like once I actually get further along that path and I gain more information, it's like, oh, maybe I actually really want to do this because I now can make the right decision because I'm in the midst of it. And that's when I really discovered I enjoy teaching. I enjoy the relationship building process and seeing other stories come to life. And it's a knack that I found to be very natural for myself.
You were doing this as a TA while also being a student, right? So you had not only the responsibility of doing your graduate program and all that is encompassed in that, but also taking on this role. What was it like, you know, kind of maintaining both of those things while, you know, still doing all the other stuff that you would do?
It's very hard, actually. And it was a very weird experience. So when I first started teaching, I knew there were going to be a couple of challenges already. First of all, for the most part, I was only 2 or 3 years older than my students, sometimes not at all, you know, and nowadays it really doesn't matter. But when you're starting off feeling very young, there's that challenge of people not respecting you because you're young. Let's also recognize I'm a woman, I'm a person of color. Those add in extra challenges that I did eventually face in the classroom, of people feeling much more comfortable to challenge me or to push back when their arguments weren't really grounded in something that's logical or would be of educational value. And then to make things worse is the week before I started teaching for the first time, I scratched my eye.
Oh no.
So I had to wear an eye patch the first week. So I looked like a pirate. And I'm like, here goes my credibility out the window. It's terrible. And I'm short, you know, so like I don't exactly have an authoritative presence that just commands armies. Yeah. But so it made it very challenging. And it took a while for me to figure out, like, okay, what is my style? How do I want to present? How do I gain my confidence back when I look like this? So
I would have been intimidated. I'm gonna say that straight up. Eye patch, like I'm not gonna mess with you. That would have been
don't mess with me. I should have just added the hook on my hand and I would have been done.
Oh, that would have been great.
But like I did little things. It was very like I wore heels because I liked the sound of the heels on the classroom. That way they could hear me when I'm walking around. That's a sound that people associate with authority. I would get to the classroom before everyone else. I'd sit on the table so that way they couldn't actually see how tall I was or compare to them. And then I wouldn't get, I wouldn't stand up until all of them were seated at that point. And I had one student, like at the end of the semester, when I was actually standing, greeting or saying goodbye to them, I was shaking their hands each as they left. They're like, I didn't realize you were this short. But that's because I realized these are stupid factors that play a role in how people see, are you an authority that I want to listen to? And so I try to diminish things that might hurt my ability to influence others positively.
It's really interesting. And we actually have our first question from chat, and it comes from Samurai Tank. Do you ever deal with people underestimating you and your knowledge or game skill because you're a woman? If so, how do you work through those moments? Which I kind of feel like this is in that category of what we're talking about.
That is a very good question. And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. Whether it's because I'm a woman or my age, or they create a lot of perceptions of what I do know or what I don't know. And it feels very unfair. And if you're somebody who might encounter any other individual, instead of making assumptions, it's always good to just ask. I wish more people would just ask to say, hey, are you familiar with this? And that allows me to share, and it helps us avoid a lot of conversations instead where they might feel like they challenge.
Yeah, that's
it's
great
hard.
advice. Yeah. Ask the question, right?
Yes, and it also depends on who's asking the question and how much power I have in those spaces. That's the hard part too. Would I love to go all in and say, I know this. Why are you lecturing me? Like I know my authority within this space. You don't have that place. But I also realize in certain roles, like sometimes I'm the teacher, right? And I have to guide them and say, this is not how you interact with people in this way. And I have to do it in a much more mentoring, patient, kind role. Or if it's a boss, right?
Yeah.
Like I've had mentors that I respect and care about, but they've treated me sometimes that way, maybe out of default. And so trying to learn to choose when to be diplomatic and choose when I can also just mentally handle it sometimes, right? I'm not always consistent with it, and it changes from variable to variable of how I can respond in those situations, which
Yeah.
is why it's restrictive.
Yeah, and that's tough, but I like that advice of asking. I
Yeah.
think that so many people are easy. It's easy to gatekeep or challenge, right? And
Mhm.
just asking the question, oh, hey, are you familiar with this? I think that's such a good way to go.
Mhm.
Obviously, as time had gone on at school, you also got pretty heavily involved in things like extracurricular activities
Yes.
at Southwestern Baptist. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about kind of the things that you were doing there.
Yes. So I care a lot about my students. And when they come up to me and say, do you want to do this? I'm like, yes, let's figure out a way of how to do this. So for a while, I was the assistant director of the speech and debate team, which meant basically every Thursday through Sunday or Monday, I was always gone traveling with the team. It was always fantastic. We did very well, but we were always tired and we ate a lot of fast food, which was great. We also started the Infuse team, which became the student media team. They did podcasts, they did social media, they were doing interviews. We had nothing to begin with. We had to start off with a charter, figuring out our
Yeah.
schedule weekly. You get it. Like it's just like streaming at the time.
Yeah.
What is the purpose? What are the needs that we're trying to fulfill? How do we create this content? Who's referring and editing it and all of that fun stuff? So that was very exciting. And then also Lambda Pi Eta for the communication honorary program. I was the lead for that. And then we also did the women's initiative there. It was my last year there, but there's of course a lot of challenges that women face. And so we wanted to address some of that. That was also around the time that Title IX was getting a lot more conversation around universities. And we wanted to make sure that we had discussions on campus with individuals who knew what this topic was to provide transparency to students and faculty in that space.
Absolutely. And do you want to go into a little bit more about what Title IX was, just for the viewers?
Sure. So Title IX encompasses a lot of things. Like in some simple ways, it was making sure that there were equal number of like activities, sports activities, for example, as there were for men, that you also provide for women. It also provided some transparency around and discussions around equality and support for those, and also how schools start to handle those things.
Yeah.
So it often trickled down to conversations of like, how does sexual harassment on campus occur? What do universities have that provides security and support? especially when more conversations were happening and reporting was starting to happen, or if universities were not reporting it and handling it as well as they should. And that was really tough for a lot of universities because those are not the stories that they want to discuss.
Yep.
It's stories they have to discuss and it happens, but they don't want that to be in the news or part of the recruiting or to say like, this is the things that are going on campus because we want to pretend it doesn't happen.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So. And obviously that's a super important topic, you know, and this is something that you kind of carried over a lot of these things when you, you know, kind of moved into your first instructor position, right, at Southwest, right? Yeah. You actually now are faculty, right, for the first time. Talk to us about your first teaching gig.
My very first teaching gig? Oh, I was like at any university?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure.
Here. Or here at Full Sail. We'll start here at Full Sail. How about that?
That works, yeah.
I was pushed into the creative presentation class, which I will say is one of my favorites. I know it encompasses much more than just the public speaking aspect. But obviously that's a portion of it. And there's a lot of joy that I get when I see students and it's their first time in this classroom and they're excited, even if it's an online setting. I know I'm very lucky to teach at the university level. I knew this was always the level that I wanted to teach at because this is one where it's an elective.
Right.
Students make the choice to pursue a higher education at this level. It's an honorable journey and I get to be a part of it. It's so exciting to me that they're embarking on this and challenging themselves in ways in which others didn't say that they had to. They're choosing this challenge for themselves. And so they come into this classroom energized and ready, but also with the idea of public speaking, terrified. Right? So it's this wonderful amalgamation of just energies pulled together that can be conflicting. And I love helping them navigate through it. I love to help them see the progress because no matter what degree program you're in, learning more about yourself and being able to tell your story can be empowering no matter where you are in your life. So I get so excited when they get like their first one turned in and I get so many disclaimers like this wasn't the microphone I wanted, or I stumbled way more than I wanted, or I know it's really bad. Just tell me what I need to do better. Like you did it. You did the first thing. That's the best step that you can take for yourself. So many people aren't willing to take that risk. So many people won't even try to go to school again, right? But you're here. And you're not realizing how strong and how amazing that is for you to push yourself in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that first step, like you talk about, you know, a lot of the students are getting familiar with for the first time with any sort of digital identity, right? Like, and that's a really cool kind of box to open when you're like, wait, there's all these cool tools that I can use to like express who I am and share these, you know, assignments and projects. And you're right there on the doorstep of that, which is really cool. The first for people that don't know, creative presentation is the very first class that you take at Full Sail, and it's all degree programs take the same class. So you get to a mix of people that may be in, you know, game design or recording arts or any of these different programs that are offered. You get kind of to meet a little bit of everything, which is really cool.
I'm like the first level boss, the gatekeeper. All right.
with the pirate
with the pirate eye and the hook. All right. Here we go. Welcome to class.
I love it. So obviously let's rewind a little bit because I feel like your journey kind of to this point started back in like 2016. You took a job as a social media specialist. At the BKD CPAs and advisor, right? So tell us a little bit about that journey and how you got there.
Okay, so small confession. I didn't want to get my PhD. I was done with going to school. And oftentimes when we go to that next level, it is very research based, right? It's a lot more reading and writing. There's less of teaching of classes. There's less application based. And I knew for me, I wanted to be much more application based. So I made the move at that point to move into that application. So I entered the marketing field. BKD was in my town already. They were at the time they were one of the top 10 national marketing firms, and they had offices all around the country, and they were looking to expand their social media presence. Right now, it had just been kind of there, but no one was focusing on it. So
Right.
I became their social media lead and I developed their strategy, helped each of their platforms, consolidated a lot of the conversations, worked within the brand team when we did the brand refresh. And then I went around, and that's why they love my teaching background, is that I would go to all the different offices and do training to teach accountants how to present themselves, especially on social media.
Yeah.
I still get messages. I got one a couple months ago from an old accounting partner, and he's like, I'm on Twitter still because of you, and I'm doing a great job. And he was.
That's
He's
awesome.
fantastic. He gets a ton of interactions. It helps him meet at conferences that he goes to. He connects with clients and the foundations and fundraisers that he does. It's great. And so I'm still watching my partner students go
Yeah.
out and change the world in different ways. But yes, it was a very different change of pace, but it was exciting to be at the national marketing level to have such a widespread impact. And to be honest, also the budget was
Yep.
nice.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
You get to do a lot more when you're at that level.
Yeah, for sure. And traveling, obviously, and going to new places, seeing new things is always a big perk of any job, right?
Yeah. Cheers to the Denver office. You all were my favorite to visit.
You took a job in 2018 at a place called Mostly Serious, which I
Yeah.
absolutely love this name of this.
Yes.
What is it? Marketing and analysis, and then later you became their digital marketing producer.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Mostly Serious, because I'm very interested to know more.
It's a great name. It was a wonderful organization started by Jared Johnson, and absolutely amazing individual. He's the kind of person you will never find in a suit. He's very comfortable, but he's such a wonderful communicator and wanting to help create really cool and innovative things. And so in this marketing agency, we would work with clients on all different levels to try to create just really cool things. And that gave us a lot of leeway, and it's built into the name, right?
Yeah.
He chose that name for a reason, and that helps us pick the right kind of clients,
Right.
right? The ones that are willing to also add in a little extra push, not just do, hey, every other hospital looks like this,
Right.
every other manufacturing company looks like this. How do we add in a little extra fun? How do we give your company a voice? And that's what appealed to me, is that they were about finding voices,
Yeah.
creating something that was unique. And so I did a lot more. It was much more technical now at this point, where I was looking at spreadsheets and
Right.
analytics a
Right.
lot more often. And so I was doing a lot of reports and working with clients and training them, like, here's how you do this, here's what these numbers mean, which it turns out a lot of agencies just screenshot what the analytics are and they just send it over in a report. A lot of clients will look at it and go, I have no idea what this means. I don't know if these numbers are good or not.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a lot of telling the story of, here's what's going
Right.
on.
Translating that, right?
Yes. Yes. So I feel like I've just, every step of the way, it's always been telling stories or telling people how to tell their stories.
Yeah, and I think that's like such an important piece, because there's, for a lot of people, especially at that time, social
Mhm.
media was still kind of in that space where some people
Yeah.
didn't take it seriously.
Nope.
And obviously you look at any company today, I mean, if they don't have that, they don't exist, right? So
Yes.
it was definitely a weird time, and I can understand clients being like, is this good information that you sent me? Like, please explain it to me. What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Especially because we're asking so much from them to create
Yeah.
content. Like, we were talking to a company like Safe and Sober, and we're like, okay, we should be on TikTok, right? Like, how much effort is this going to take? How do we make the videos for this? Because it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
What's the outcome?
Yeah.
Especially, as both of us know, within marketing, it isn't a one-step process. It's not like they see one thing and then they do it immediately. It's like, I promise 27 steps later, they're going to move forward with what you want them to do.
It takes time, but it's important. Those
Yes.
pieces, those breadcrumbs,
Yes.
right? Like,
All
you
the
wanna have
touch
that.
points.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And so obviously you did worked with these outside companies for a while, and then in 2017, you also started to be an adjunct instructor for South West Baptist University. Is that right?
Yes, and that was my first time teaching online.
What was that transition like? You had been in person, now you're doing this online. What, like,
Mhm.
obviously they're two
awful.
different things, both have pros and cons, but what was it like for you kind of in that first kind of class, right?
It was not great. It was not my favorite, but it was also because of the online platform we were
Right.
using. And a lot of students, I don't mind. I've voiced this before. Blackboard is not my favorite.
Right.
I don't enjoy it. Or it's similar, like it went through iterations of like Angel before as well. It wasn't conducive for uploading video. We weren't doing live Zoom meetings. And so there was just a lot of my curriculum that had to be so much written, and it didn't provide for any interesting way for the information to be conveyed. And in something like teaching interpersonal, to have it be so dry
Right.
was burdensome for me and the students.
Right.
So it wasn't where I wanted it to be, but that also made me curious to say there has to be a way that we can do this better. If we're going to do this, and we know online teaching is the direction that more and more universities need to go to be able to be more accessible to students
Right.
on different levels, especially because they can't always afford to come to the town or
Absolutely.
take time off. So online has to be available. How do you make it better and just as valuable as in the classroom? So even though it wasn't my favorite initial experience, it really got me thinking about how do we adapt our communication online?
Yeah, and it's such an important piece of the puzzle now.
Mhm.
And so many more people have the opportunity, right, to go
Mhm.
back and either finish or go into a completely, different career because of the opportunity that online provides. And obviously those early days, it was different. Things were okay. How is this going to work? But here we are, and we just went through, a pandemic, or still kind of in the middle of it, or however you look at it, where that
Mhm.
was the only option, right? Like,
Yes.
and it really kind of changed a lot of things up because of that option. I think it's kind of funny how we met, right? Like, we started to talk, and we knew
Yeah.
you from the Game Hers,
Mhm.
another great organization. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden it's like, wait, she works at Full Sail. Like, how is this?
Yes.
How do we not know? And partly it's because you joined Full Sail in 2020, right?
Yes.
What kind of brought you to Full Sail? Was there? How did you find us? Like, what was that
Mhm.
whole kind of process like?
Yes. So I was looking at getting back into teaching full time. I knew that that's where my heart was, where I felt most fulfilled, and that I could make the greatest impact that I wanted to make. So I was looking. I was also really open to the idea of leaving Missouri. No offense to Missouri. Okay, maybe
I
a
can
little. I
understand. I
mean,
can.
Missouri's got great barbecue up in Kansas City, so you
Yeah.
guys can stay happy up there. But I really wanted a change. Now, to be fair, I was looking more on the West Coast, but Full Sail was calling to me, and I loved, again, how application focused it was. That
Yeah.
aligned with my philosophy on education, that it needed to be very clear of not just here's tests and exams, but here's actual projects that you eventually will be doing in your workplace. This functions a lot more similarly to internships. So I love that translation. I said,
Yeah.
"Yes, that's how I see education functioning at the best level. That's where I wanna be."
I like that, and it was such a funny kind of interaction. We invited you to the fortress, and
Yes.
Sari, who is your best friend officially, not
Yes.
me.
Yes.
She's like, you gotta come meet everybody, and
It was
and,
amazing.
and we're like, this is your first time on campus. You didn't know about this. Like, it was a cool experience for sure.
I loved it. I loved it. I got so excited, and then I went home, I'm like, "You will never believe what happened today." I was so thrilled. I felt like a kindergartner coming back from their first day of school, but it was just so exciting to know about the amazing people and the options that Full Sail provides, because it was just like, this is the university that I wanna be a part of. It made me so much more excited and kind of re-fall in love with Full Sail and what we can
Right.
be about.
Yeah, and and Mudcat saying I didn't believe it. None of it still
Still
sounds.
doesn't. In all fairness, I make up random lies to tell him anyway, so he doesn't know what's true anymore.
Well, let's talk about kind of that first interaction with you from the Game Her. So
Yeah.
you've been a talk show host. You kind of do something similar to this, and
Mhm.
an ambassador for Game Hers for the past 2 years. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about Game Hers, Pink Pixels, and kind of your involvement with the organization.
Yeah. Before they were even officially launched, they went to PAX South. And that was actually the very first convention that I went to. It was kind of perfect timing. And I was kind of actually at a time where I was very zoned out. I was peopled out. So I was just with my hat on, walking very quietly through all the rows, trying to avoid anyone at that point. And I saw them and they had their couch out and their signs. And I'm like, what is this? This interests me. Like there are other interesting things, but this is something I haven't seen at any of the other booths.
Yeah.
And that's where I got a chance to talk. I think it was with Rebecca at the time. And I was like, what is this? What do you guys got going on? What is the purpose of this? And I got to learn about how this space they were carving out and trying to empower and amplify women in the gaming space. And I loved their vision. It's very ambitious. It's huge, right? Like women in gaming, that is broad subject matter, right? We are so many within that space of how we can identify, or even those who are women in gaming, but don't always see themselves as gamers, right? So it's been wonderful. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I want in on this. I know you all haven't even launched. Let me know. Here's my email. Here's my Twitter. Let me know anything that you're doing because I'm in. I want this. I want to be a part and supportive of this. And we just kind of kept things off that from that point on, just kind of kept going.
Yeah. And tell us about Pink Pixels, because obviously I think that's a really important show and love what you guys do there.
Thank you. Yes. So every Monday, except for holidays and things like that, right? every-ish Monday, we bring wonderful women in the gaming space. And it comes from a variety of cosplayers, those from Twitch or Amazon, those game developers, streamers, anywhere and everywhere within this gaming space. And we learn more about who they are as gamers, how they got there, their stories. And it gives us a chance to empathize and connect and make that community again as we support one another and we learn much more richly about this world, this gaming world that we love and how we can continue to try to make it better.
Yeah, and I love that. And our very own Just Ryder was a guest on your show last June. And it was great to watch that. And obviously this, I think is such an important kind of piece of the puzzle. You talked earlier in our conversation about feeling like you didn't belong. You didn't see yourself represented in that. And here's an organization that's working really hard and very ambitious to try to change that. And I think it's such an important piece of the puzzle because gaming is for everyone. And like I said, everybody wants to belong, right? You want to have those things. So thank you for your involvement in the Gamers and really everything that you're doing to help that organization grow and really kind of take things to the next level, right?
Yes. Yes. And I like that you use the word grow, right? Because it's never just done. And especially within the gaming space, like we always need to become better. We need to listen better. We need to include better. And so that is always going to be an ongoing journey. And as much as the organization does, we have to as well. And that's always a challenge and that's hard to have sometimes.
But I think it starts like with your story. You talk about you saw this thing and you go, hey, what is this? I like this. And I think sometimes you talked early. I just, you have to ask the question sometimes. And for a lot of people, they're scared to get involved. I couldn't do that. I couldn't, but just, hey, what do I need to do to be a part of this? Like, that's such an important first step. That's a brave step. But it's obviously an important piece of what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're out there and you think about like, hey, I want to get involved in something but I could never do it. You can, and it's that first step. Just take that first step, and then that leads to the next one, and you see where it goes, right?
Yes. And your conversation of learning is important. And it's not always that you've done it maliciously. Like I've never been like actively a monster trying to terrorize other people, but it's also becoming aware of maybe where I was sloppy or apathetic or there was one and it changed my mindset completely. So I'll admit, I originally thought teabagging was pretty funny, right? But that's because I've only played with people that I feel safe with.
Right.
And I only do it to people that I know. And so within those rules, it's always been funny. Right. Like, okay. And then, like even like exchanging his gifts, like I give you tea bags, right? Like, okay, it's Earl Grey, but like it's a joke, but that's because for me, I've been lucky enough and been in spaces safe enough that it's never been a negative experience for me. But when I get to talk to others and I hear like, that's where they're being targeted, right? And that's a way in which they're pushed out of the community. That changes to say, even though I have always viewed this as positive, I want to be much more aware of how I'm actively partaking in this community and making sure that I'm not encouraging behavior that could hurt others. So that was a big learning moment for me to admit out loud on stream that I did something that could be harmful to others. And then to tell that story, to own it and make those changes. But it's something that we have to do.
Yeah, and I think to your kind of account here, I mean, that's part of being human and growth,
Yeah.
right? Is accepting, hey, maybe I messed up, and this is something. It doesn't make you a hypocrite because you did it. It makes you a human, and you're growing. If you can change your course of action because of that interaction that you had,
hmm
you're better for it, and everybody else is going to be as well. So I think that's great, advice for anybody out there that, hey, maybe I can be more inclusive in things like this, which is super important. So, obviously, you've got a following online. You're known for a couple of different things out on the internet, but one of them is you are the co-owner of D20 Deathmatch. Tell the audience that if they don't know or not, what is D20 Deathmatch?
Yeah, D20 Deathmatch. D&D meets PvP in the weirdest, most chaotic way. Like, we know D&D was not meant for PvP. Like, it's broken. It would be terrible if we took it seriously. But you can't do that. So instead, we just made it as crazy as possible. Like, we're inspired from like Mystery Science Theater 3000, WWE, and the storytelling and big personalities there, Celebrity Deathmatch. And we're like, let's bring this all together and create something that is epic. And it gives us the chance to play with D&D players from around the world. Literally, it's so exciting. Now, eventually, I'd like to travel around the world playing it, but we're working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And to talk about that, Jacob asks a great question here. Jacob is Nachos. He says, got to see D20 Deathmatch live at GCX this past year. It was so awesome. What goes into putting on a live show for something that's usually streamed?
Oh, so much. That was months of planning, like figuring out what is important, what is not important. Like Mudcat's in chat, he'll be like, he really wanted a fog machine, light strobes, things that we can jump on. And there's me saying, that's a liability. You don't have insurance for that. You're going to give people strokes, right? Like, you can't do any of that. So it was trying to figure out, what do we actually have available? What can we do? What's important to the heart of the show? And how do we even more so keep what's key, which was that audience interaction and having fun? Those were the two most important parts of how we can do it. Oh, and I'm sorry, he also wanted a blood cannon.
Oh, I mean, obviously you have to have
obvious.
I mean, that should have happened. You gotta.
Next year, we're gonna hand out white T-shirts that just say D20 on it, and then run around with squirt guns. I guess, I don't know, whatever. I don't think we're gonna get blood cannons. I don't know.
The first row is the splash zone, so it's okay.
Yeah,
you sign a waiver when you come in. That's just how it works.
We'll figure something.
Obviously,
I'm sure they won't get mad if we stain the carpets or anything.
No, they'll be fine. They won't care. Yeah, not at all. But that was such a cool opportunity for you guys, and obviously working with good friends of Full Sail, the folks over at Rare Drop, obviously who they put on GCX, and I think that's something that's really neat to kind of do something that was built and created for a live stream purpose in actual in front of people, almost kind of like a stage show. What was your favorite moment of that event?
Actually, one small correction. We haven't shared this, so you wouldn't have known, but our initial dream was always to have D20 Deathmatch be a live show.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
It has always been our goal to eventually, we would love to have like an actual stage and invite people in. Like, we imagine it one day eventually being just like on a wrestling stage.
Yeah.
With people fully surrounding us, the mic coming down from the center, concert-ish style with loud music and people screaming all around, different players jumping in and out of the ring, bringing it to life. Like, that has always been our goal, to try to actually get it there.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a lot harder. So we started online and seeing that journey to build there. But yes, being live was and is still always that goal, to get to that, to push to that, because we want to see D&D taken to that next level.
Absolutely. And if you look up D20 Deathmatch online, you may see that you're currently doing kind of like a collab with Cucumber v Chonk. Tell us a little bit about that collab, because I started watching and I was like, okay, I'm subscribe is exactly what I did.
Yes. This is the second time they have been on our channel. The first time was equally impressive. There was some intense murdering that happens there. So we collaborated with Perception Studio, which they are top-notch puppeteers.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. They're out there in California doing amazing, impressive work all the time. And so we're very lucky if we can catch them between gigs and bring them on our show for it. And they are phenomenal. Two adorable characters that look like they should be on Sesame Street, actively murdering each other in a D&D style fashion that is not always family appropriate.
Viewer discretion advised, right?
Viewer discretion is advised heavily, but it is very enjoyable. It's so fantastic, and they're incredibly talented. The one thing I didn't expect, and I had to share this with them, but it turns out one challenge I didn't anticipate with playing with puppets is that you don't know when they're done talking.
Yes.
You don't have nonverbals to go. They don't blink. They don't have facial expressions that change. I'm like, I found myself talking over them or not sure when I'm supposed to hop on because they're a little different. Okay.
You don't think about those things though, you know, like you're like, oh, this is gonna go perfectly. Then you like, oh, how do I know? Yeah.
Like, okay. And if you ever see the puppets going a little to the side, it's because they're losing blood in their hand and they need to rest. They sit under tables on like seat cushions with their laptop under the table as they play D&D one-handed.
The dedication though, you know, like that's impressive, right?
Yes.
You know, it's actually kind of cool because there's a lot of students. For a while, we had someone on the stream team here for Full Sail Armada that was really into D&D and role play and really had built their personal channel all about that. So what sort of advice would you give to others out there that are looking to build like a D&D cast and really start to get into more of the streaming / creative side of that type of content?
You need to realize if it is on Twitch, it is a show.
Yeah.
People often forget, oh, I'm going to take my home campaign and I'm going to bring it here. That doesn't translate well. It is not always as entertaining for others as we sit there and you take a minute or two to figure out what are you going to do with your character, right? Or how long are we going to wait for the dice to roll? Or who can actually see your maps? So it is very much so a show in terms of you are not making a campaign just for your players, but you are also making one for everyone out there. And so there's a lot more storytelling components and a secondary audience that you have to consider of what their experience is. So there's the D&D, like the DM as you lead this game, and then there's the producer side. And those are two very different roles. And a lot of DMs just think, I'm just going to DM on here, and they forget all the responsibilities of being a producer. Right. The other challenge behind that is when you are live, it makes it harder for you to sometimes take care of your players because you do now have to balance that need between the show itself and your players. And that sometimes means they don't get the time that they want, or they don't feel comfortable exposing or putting their characters through vulnerable situations, or that you have to be careful with what you say and have discussions about it. Like sometimes we go through tough subjects.
Yeah.
And D&D can be a very cathartic process. But if I'm doing it live, I'm going to change how I showcase my character and perhaps reveal less of what I'm vulnerable about because I don't want to share it with the internet, right? I don't want to explore what could be very important and heavy in something that I'm still going through with everyone else. And people are going to comment about it.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of commentary can be difficult. And you have to then manage like the safety of your players and all of it. Like if somebody says something terrible in chat, right? There's some creative ones. I've seen a lot of creative ones, but that doesn't make them better.
Yeah.
Right. So it can make your players uncomfortable and how you have these discussions. And you have to be very thoughtful because just like any other form of media, the stories you put out there are either confirming or challenging the norms that we see. So whose stories are you telling?
Yeah.
How do we choose to form them? You have less consequences when it's just you sitting at a table with friends.
Right.
But publicly, you are now influencing others. There's a heavy responsibility that you have.
Yeah, and there's, I'm sure, a lot of topics that you want to represent in a responsible way, right? So,
yes.
And that live aspect of it, like you said, the chat, like there's while all of this is happening, there's still a live component to what you guys are doing, which is really incredible. I think the amount of work that goes into producing, not only creating the content that you guys are doing, but then producing that into this is really incredible. So, if you guys haven't had a chance, definitely make sure to go check out D20 Deathmatch on YouTube and on Twitch. Obviously, you have carried into other areas with your brand. You have your own Twitch channel. You've also been like the host for Norton LifeLock. You've done some streams with them. Talk about your experience with Norton.
Yeah, Norton was a fantastic company. It was great to do meetings with them ahead of time, figure out, okay, here's coming our upcoming month. What are hot topics Norton needs represented? How do we integrate this in with the gaming world? Having these conversations to make sure we're reaching topics that are relevant to both of our listeners that we're trying to have and share the message in an interesting way. And I got to work with the amazing Big Cheese, who's incredibly talented and so kind and amazing. I love him.
We're big fans.
Yes, I can't wait to see where he goes next. He's constantly evolving his brand, but you have to in this industry. And Norton has been so supportive every step of the way. And that's hard to find. Find brand partners that are like, yeah, I like what you're doing. Whatever you suggest, we want to be a part of it. There's a lot that say, make this content this way. And it's so boring and dry, right? It's like, no one's going to want to pay attention to this. But Norton was in like, all right, what games do you suggest? What are topics that you think are important? Bring in your experiences as you talk about this. And I was like, thank you. This is a good partner.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's an important piece of kind of that creator space is like finding the brands that do listen, that know, hey, this is important. What's going on? What are you doing? Let you lead that kind of conversation on behalf of them, right? And that's a really good brand partner, right? You want those types of things. So let's talk about Twitch. Obviously, you stream on Twitch. You play games like Destiny 2 and Sea of Thieves. On occasion, your dogs may steal the show in that green chair back there.
Yes,
which is always great. What's your favorite part of streaming on Twitch?
My favorite part about streaming on Twitch is that we just get to talk.
Yeah,
I really. The games are secondary. Like we do it as a way to talk about and create narratives and talk about those. Like my favorite one actually was one that we just did, and it was on Halloween. And we did a read aloud of the Godzilla NES on Creepypasta. I had never read it before. A student recommended it to me in one of their assignments. And I'm like, okay, I got to check this out.
Check it out.
It was amazing. But it reminds me that for my stream, they don't come for my gameplay. I mean, I'm the best Destiny streamer out there.
Fair enough. I am sometimes in that boat as well. So
yeah. I'm the best. There is no better hunter out there.
Oh, you're a hunter. Okay, I see.
Yeah. No judgments. I look great with my goose head right now. So I look fantastic. Destiny fashion is at an all-time high.
It is at high.
It is. But ultimately, we just talk.
Yeah.
We hang out. We allow ourselves to relax, unwind, and more importantly, to be real. They see my mistakes, and it's taken me a while to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But it's, as I've always told my students, and it's hard for me to learn this lesson as well. And it's really the era of marketing right now anyway, but it's authenticity.
Yeah.
It takes a while because you really have to know yourself and you have to be comfortable sharing that. And then bringing that to others. And that's hard to do in many ways, especially when you're exhausted or you don't know who you are or what you're feeling or what you're going through. Earlier this year, I had a nice, interesting bout with depression and anxiety. So that made it incredibly hard to figure out, how do I be authentic in myself? Because I want to encourage others to do so.
Yeah.
And so deciding when to have those conversations or when I needed to take a break in those moments was difficult. But that always reminds me in my community, this was a sign. This was one of the biggest flags that I said, I did this right. This was a green flag when I knew I needed to take time off. And they said, no, absolutely. We care for you. We'll listen. We're here. You do whatever you need to do. And that made me realize, yes, these are people that we give space to one another. We support each other in our creative endeavors or our mental efforts that we need. That's what I needed most of all. And the fact that I can try to provide that for others, and then it unsurprisingly, well, it was surprising to me, but unsurprising for the people that are in my stream, like Julia hanging out right now, of how much they responded back and gave it back to me. It was beautiful, and
Yeah.
I didn't expect Twitch to be able to give me something like that.
Yeah, and I think that even like rejuvenates you to be more involved in it, right? Is hey, I needed to focus on my mental health. I needed to take the time. I
Mhm.
needed to take the break, which is so important because so many people get burnt out now because
Yeah.
they just have that mindset of I have to keep going, I have to keep creating, I have to keep streaming.
Yes.
And it's okay. It happens to
Mhm.
everybody. You talk to any of these pro gamers, any of the people that are at the top, they get burnt out, and sometimes they push it too far, and then they have a break, and you don't want that. And so it's great to hear that you took the time, and your community backing you up and being supportive of that is huge, and giving you that opportunity.
Mhm.
Very, very big cheers all around for that, because that's such an important piece. And obviously there's a lot more people talking about it today than they were a couple years ago,
Yeah.
which is even more important. So obviously, that really kind of gives you an opportunity to do more now that you have had this time off, right? You
Mhm.
feel better about what you're doing, where you're going, and what the next steps are. And talk to me, kind of like from an industry perspective. You have been involved in a lot now, right? You've been kind of done a bunch of different things in a bunch of different areas. What so far has been your favorite thing about working in the industry, and now moving to the next chapter? What are you looking forward to, in this industry?
I love that nothing looks the same in this industry. I feel like I've never repeated a single project in my life, which is also exhausting and awful
Yeah.
sometimes because it'd be really good to template something. But instead, that's where you get to really feed your creative side. Like, okay, I'm gonna do a one shot with this team over here. For a while, I'm going to do a series of show hosting over here. But every single time we come back to it, we're like, okay, if we're gonna do this again, we have to evolve it. What does this look like? And it's been exciting. Like I've done so many different random projects. Like, okay, I guess I'm doing more voice acting within this space, or I'm going to now create and just do the media for
Yeah.
this charity on this end. And it creates such a different place to push you. And I enjoy that because the more I learn, the better I can become overall
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously we have a ton more students now that are into content creation in all
Yes.
aspects of content creation, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a really important piece of the puzzle at Full Sail. It's just, we obviously focus heavily on the behind the scenes, right? But taking that knowledge from behind the scenes and translating it into what you are creating as a student is really important. So we've seen an influx of students creators, come through Full Sail, and after graduation, they're looking to go out into these industries. What sort of advice, from one content creator to another, would you give them?
Sure. You need to make sure that one, you always know what your message is with anything that you're creating. What is it saying? And the second part is, to whom are you saying it to? So many times, and I get it, like you can do this, like even with the simplicity of just like Twitch streaming, right? I'm going to turn on my camera and I'm just going to play a game. And if you want to do that, that's fine. That's fun. But that's not going to guarantee anything meaningful. You don't know who you're trying to reach. You don't know what you're trying to do on there. What's the purpose that you want out of this? Especially if you are expecting some sort of outcome.
Right.
How can you have an outcome if you don't have purposefulness in what you're doing? You can't just hope for it.
Yeah.
You need to. And the other thing behind that is if you don't, people are going to fill in those gaps for you. They're going to tell you what you should be doing, what your work does mean. My coworker, one of my fellow teachers, he stole this from someone else. So I'm stealing it from him. But the idea is never let your work speak for itself. You need to. You need to frame things around it, both for yourself and for others, because you are going to get a lot of miscommunication out there. People are going to assume the message from somebody else also applies to you. And you don't want to be someone else. You're not. You are you, and that's amazing. But you need to know how you're adding that value.
Yeah, and that's such great advice, because it is
Thank you.
important to add that, like, and hey, you borrowed it and it's carried on, and now it will live here, and
Yes.
someone's gonna watch this video on YouTube, and they're gonna share that same information with someone else. So it will
Yeah.
continue to evolve, which is kind of the cool part about creation, right? Is
Mhm.
everybody's continuing to evolve what they're doing, and taking that to the next kind of level. So before we go, obviously, I want to give you some time to shout out where you are, where people can find you, how to do all those things. But before we go, I really, obviously, I have seen such an influx of role playing and D&D streams, content, over the last couple of years, and it's really growing. Where do you see that going? What's that kind of next 5 years look like for you guys?
Oh, well, one, we will eventually want to do more live shows. Like that's the big goal. We are going to be in places. We're trying to figure out like how do we go to conventions that aren't in Florida?
Yeah.
How do we ship everything in our PCs to get it to where we need to be? So there's a little tech conversations and finding like the right conventions that are going to match up and align with what we're looking for. But ultimately what it is saying it's not just D&D, but like TTRPG,
Hmm.
and not just and this is where streaming is changing as well. It is becoming much more story based. How do we begin to tell stories that are more immersive and varied? And I think that's where it's going to become much more interesting. It's going to be much more niche. I love that there's these big stories and campaigns that everyone wants to get involved in. Those are always going to be like our big headlining games. But just like we've seen a much stronger appreciation for indie games
Yep.
more recently, there's going to be a stronger appreciation for the unique stories and home brews that we can create on our own. And you're going to have to know how to carve out that right audience and to find them who are going to actually appreciate your stories.
Yeah, I like that.
That's where you're
And
going.
I'm excited for that because I think there's a
Yeah.
whole lot that can be done, and I am definitely going to help you guys figure out how to take the show on the road because I think that's going to be awesome. That's very fun.
Can we just make you a lead on that and you figure all
and I
that
just
out?
take okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
just
Sign
run
me
with
up.
it. Thank you.
So tell everybody where they can find you, how to get in touch with you if they have questions.
Sure. So I am not great with my personal branding. So when I created all my social accounts, I actually purposely for a while made myself difficult to find because each one was trying to reach a very different audience at the time. So please forgive me. But I am Becca Godsey on Twitter, Beck Godsey on Instagram, Causticphoenix on Twitch and on YouTube. And of course, with my D&D show with Mudcat, we are D20 Deathmatch, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. You can find us all over the place.
Awesome. Well, Becca, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your journey with the audience. Our very next episode is going to be on November 16th with Jay Melamed, who's the founder and CEO of XP League. It will be right here on the Full Sail Armada channel. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We will see you next time and have a great rest of your evening.